I'm Emma, 38 female. I live in a quiet suburban town with my wonderful husband, Mark, and our amazing 14-year-old daughter, Lily. I work as a senior financial analyst, a job that suits my personality perfectly. I like order, predictability, and for things to add up correctly. For years, I thought my life was a perfect equation, balanced and secure. But I was about to find out that some variables, particularly family, can throw everything into chaos, forcing you to solve a problem you never wanted. This is the story of how a single slap, a forged check for $15,000, and my parents' shocking betrayal forced me to call the police on my own sister, a decision that led to a courtroom battle that destroyed our family forever. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. In my family, there were two daughters, but only one ever seemed to shine in my parents' eyes. That was my younger sister, Zoe. 6 years my junior, Zoe was the artist, the free spirit, the one who was always chasing a new, exciting dream. I was the planner, the stable one, the one who followed a straight path from high school to college to a career. My parents, Robert and Margaret, both retired professionals themselves. A teacher and an accountant seemed to appreciate my stability, but they adored Zoe's unpredictability. They called it her spark. I called it a complete and utter lack of responsibility. From the moment she turned 18, Zoe's life had been a series of spectacular failures, all of them cushioned by the ever-present financial safety net of our parents. Her first venture was a multi-level marketing scheme selling essential oils that she swore would make her a millionaire. It ended with her garage filled with unsold inventory and a credit card debt of over $5,000. My dad, the retired accountant who had taught me to balance a checkbook at age 12, simply sighed and paid it off. "She's learning," he'd said, ruffling her hair as if she were a child who just scraped her knee. Next came her artisan jewelry business, which involved buying cheap trinkets from overseas and marking them up by 500%. That lasted until she got bored, leaving another few $1,000s in debt, which my mom quietly covered from her pension. There was the dropshipping t-shirt phase, the life coaching certification phase, and the disastrous attempt to become a day trader after watching a 10-minute video online. Each time, the story was the same. Zoe would dive in with manic enthusiasm, rack up debt, and then lose interest, leaving our parents to clean up the financial mess. My husband, Mark, and I watched this cycle with growing frustration. We never asked our parents for a dime. We had worked hard for everything we had: our comfortable home, our sensible cars, our carefully managed savings. I tried to talk to them about it, gently at first. "Mom, don't you think you're enabling her?" I asked once after they'd paid off her car loan. My mother had looked at me with a pained expression. "Emma, you don't understand. Life doesn't come as easily to Zoe as it does to you. She has a creative soul. We have to support her." Supporting her was one thing, funding a lifestyle of perpetual irresponsibility was another, but they couldn't see the difference. To them, my financial independence was a given, while Zoe's dependence was a need. I was the strong one, so I didn't require help. Zoe was the fragile one, so she deserved it all. The latest dream was the most ambitious yet. Zoe had decided she was going to be a social media influencer. A travel and lifestyle influencer, to be exact. The irony of someone with no job and no money wanting to influence others on lifestyle choices was apparently lost on my entire family. She had a few thousand followers on Instagram, mostly bot, and she'd post filtered photos of herself in local parks, pretending she was in exotic locations. "All I need is a little seed money," she announced during one Sunday dinner, "to get some professional camera gear, a new laptop, and to fund a trip to Bali. That's where you really blow up as a travel influencer." I nearly choked on my lasagna. A trip to Bali. She said it so casually, as if it were a trip to the grocery store. My parents, of course, were captivated. "Oh, darling, that sounds wonderful," my mom cooed. "I was thinking about $15,000, Zoe said, looking directly at me. I just stared back at her, my fork frozen halfway to my mouth. "That should be enough to get me started. And Emma, since you're so good with money, I thought maybe you could invest in my brand. I put my fork down and gave a short, sharp laugh. Zoe, I'm not giving you $15,000. That's a ridiculous amount of money for a whim. Her face fell, the charming smile replaced by a petulant pout. It's not a whim, it's my carry. My father cleared his throat. Now, Emma, he started, using his placating, let's be reasonable tone. Your sister has a business plan. I turned to him. Dad, she has a wish list, not a business plan. Has she shown you any projections, any return on investment calculations? He shifted uncomfortably. Of course, she hadn't. Zoe didn't deal in details, only in grand visions funded by other people's money. The dinner ended tensely. Later that week, my mom called. Honey, we were talking about Zoe's idea. Your father and I think it has merit. We don't have that kind of cash liquid right now, but you do. You and Mark are so comfortable. Couldn't you just help your sister out? We'll consider it an early inheritance for her. I was speechless. An early inheritance? Mom, the money you're talking about is our savings. Mark and I have been putting that money aside for years. It's for Lily's college fund. I'm not giving Lily's future to Zoe so she can take selfies in Bali. There was a cold silence on the other end of the line. I think you're being very selfish, Emma, my mother said, her voice dripping with disappointment. Family is supposed to help each other. She hung up before I could reply. I felt a familiar mix of anger and guilt. They had always been masters of making me feel like the bad guy for simply being responsible. Mark was furious when I told him. Absolutely not, he said. That money is for our daughter. End of discussion. I agreed, but I knew, with a sinking feeling, that for Zoe and my parents, it was anything but the end of the discussion. They had just hit a wall with me, and now they would be looking for a way around it. 2 weeks after the disastrous Sunday dinner, a fragile peace had settled. My parents weren't speaking to me, which was more of a relief than a punishment, and Zoe had gone silent. I hoped naively that she had accepted my decision and was off chasing some other, less expensive dream. We were hosting a small barbecue for Mark's birthday. I'd invited my parents out of a sense of duty, and to my surprise, they accepted and brought Zoe along. I should have known it was a Trojan horse. The afternoon started pleasantly enough. Mark was happy, Lily was laughing with her cousins, and the sun was shining. Zoe was on her best behavior, floating around the garden with a bright, artificial smile plastered on her face, complimenting my flower beds and telling Mark how young he looked. It was all an act, and I knew it, but for the sake of a peaceful family gathering, I played along. About an hour into the party, Zoe found me in the kitchen. Hey sis, she said, her voice sickly sweet. My phone is dead and I need to check something online really quickly. Can I just borrow Lily's laptop for a sec? It's on the charger in her room. I hesitated. A small warning bell went off in my head, but I dismissed it. What harm could she do? Sure, Zoe, just be quick, she might need it for her homework later, I said, turning my attention back to the potato salad. Thanks. You're the best, she chirped, and I heard her footsteps heading up the stairs. The next hour was a blur of party duties, serving food, cutting the cake, and making sure everyone had a drink. I didn't think about Zoe or the laptop again. Later that evening, after all our guests had left, I sat down at my desk in our small home office to pay a few bills. I logged into my online banking portal to check my balance before scheduling the payments. My eyes scanned the screen, and then I froze. My heart dropped into my stomach, a cold, heavy stone. There was a transaction from 2 days ago that made no sense. A check withdrawal, for exactly $15,000. I stared at the number, feeling a wave of nausea. It couldn't be. It had to be a mistake, a bank error. I clicked on the transaction details and my blood ran cold. It showed a scanned image of the cashed check. The signature was a clumsy imitation of my own. I immediately knew. I felt it in the pit of my stomach, a certainty so absolute it made me feel sick. Mark and Lily were in the living room watching a movie. I walked in, my face must have been pale because Mark immediately paused the TV. Emma, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. I couldn't form the words. I just gestured for him to follow me to the office. I pointed at the screen. He leaned in, read the details, and his face hardened. No, he whispered. She wouldn't. But we both knew she would. We both knew exactly who had done this. My mind raced back through the day. Zoe. The fake smiles, the compliments, the odd request to use the laptop. But the transaction was from 2 days ago. How? Then it hit me, my emergency checkbook. I kept one in the bottom drawer of my desk, the very desk I was sitting at. I yanked the drawer open. It was still there, but when I flipped it open, a single check was neatly torn from the middle. Just then, Lily came to the door of the office. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her brow furrowed with concern. At that exact moment, my phone rang. It was Zoe. My hand trembled as I answered and put it on speaker. "Hey, Emma," her voice was bright and cheerful. "I just wanted to call and say thanks again for the loan. The plane tickets to Bali are booked. I'm leaving next week. This is going to change my life. I owe it all to you." I felt the air leave my lungs. "Loan? Zoe, what are you talking about? I never gave you a loan." There was a slight pause. "Don't be silly," she laughed, a nervous edge to her voice. "That check you left for me, I cashed it yesterday. The $15,000 for my influencer startup." "I never left you a check, Zoe," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "You stole my checkbook, you forged my signature, and you stole $15,000 from our daughter's college fund." Mark was staring at the phone, his face a mask of cold fury. Lily's eyes widened. She took a step back, realizing something terrible was happening. Zoe's cheerful facade crumbled. "You can't prove that," she shrieked. "You said I could have it. You're just jealous that I'm finally going to be successful." It was then that Lily spoke up, her voice small and trembling. "Aunt Zoe, a couple of days ago, when you came over with Grandma, you were in here, in the office. I saw you." We all turned to look at Lily. She was remembering the surprise visit from my mom and Zoe 2 days prior, where Zoe had asked to use my bathroom and been gone for 10 minutes. It all clicked into place. That's when she took the check. Zoe heard her over the phone. A strangled sound of pure rage came through the speaker. "You little brat, you're lying." Suddenly, a car door slammed outside. Not even a minute later, our front door burst open. Zoe stood there, her face contorted in a mask of fury. She must have been parked just down the street. She stormed into the office, her phone still in her hand. "You will not ruin this for me," she screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You're a liar." Lily, terrified, tried to squeeze past her to get to me. "Mommy," she whimpered. As Lily passed, Zoe spun around, her eyes wild. "And you stay out of this." In a flash of movement that I'll see in my nightmares for the rest of my life, she swung her arm and slapped our daughter hard across the face. The sound was like a gunshot in the small room. Lily cried out, stumbling back into Mark's arms, a bright red handprint already blooming on her cheek. For a moment, there was just stunned silence. Then, the world exploded. The silence that followed the slap lasted only a second, but it felt like an eternity. In that second, something inside me shattered. The last vestiges of sisterly affection, of family obligation, of the desire to keep the peace, it all turned to dust. All I could see was the red mark on my daughter's cheek and the terrified tears welling in her eyes. Then, Mark moved. He moved with a speed and fury I had never seen in him before. He stepped in front of Lily, shielding her, and pointed a shaking finger at the door. "Get out," he roared, his voice low and guttural. "Get out of my house right now." Zoe, who seemed just as shocked by her own actions as we were, stumbled backward, her face pale. I didn't mean to," she stammered, the rage draining away to be replaced by a pathetic flicker of fear. "She surprised me." "Out," Mark bellowed again. Zoe didn't need a third invitation. She turned and fled, slamming the front door behind her. I rushed to Lily, pulling her into a tight hug. She was sobbing, not just from the sting of the slap, but from the shock of the betrayal. My own hands were shaking as I gently touched her cheek. It was already starting to swell. "It's okay, baby," I whispered, my voice choked with a rage so profound it felt like it might consume me. "You're safe. I'm so sorry." Mark locked the front door and came back to us, his arms wrapping around us both. We stood there for a long time, a broken little unit in the ruins of what was supposed to have been a happy evening. It took less than 15 minutes for the phone to ring. I saw my mother's name on the screen and my stomach clenched. I knew what this was. Zoe had already called them, feeding them her twisted version of events. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, my father called. I ignored that too. Then came the texts, a flood of them. "Emma, call me this instant. Zoe is hysterical. You need to hear her side of the story. Robert and I are coming over." Mark took my phone. "Don't," he said firmly. "We need to focus on Lily. We can deal with them tomorrow." He was right. We spent the rest of the evening tending to our daughter, giving her an ice pack for her cheek, and reassuring her over and over that she had done nothing wrong. But I could see the confusion and hurt in her eyes. Her aunt had hit her. And soon, she would learn that her grandparents would defend it. The next morning, my parents showed up at our door unannounced. Mark answered. I could hear their raised voices from the kitchen, where I was making Lily a quiet breakfast. "We are not leaving until we speak to our daughter," my father's voice boomed. I took a deep breath, told Lily to stay put, and walked to the entryway. My parents stood there, their faces set like stone. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed, but not from sympathy for her granddaughter. It was the performative grief of a mother defending her troubled child. "Emma, this has gone far enough," my mother began, skipping any pretense of a greeting. "Zoe told us everything. How you accused her of stealing, how you set Lily on her to tell lies." I cut her off. "Stop, just stop right there. Are you seriously suggesting Lily lied?" "She's a child, she's suggestible. You probably fed her that story about Zoe being in your office," my mother shot back. My father nodded in agreement. "Your sister made a mistake with the check, Emma. It was a misunderstanding. She thought you would approve, but to accuse her and then have your daughter attack her character, it's just cruel." I stared at them, my mind struggling to process the sheer audacity of their words. "Attack her character? Dad," she slapped Lily across the face. "She assaulted a child." "Our child, your granddaughter." My mother waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, for heaven's sake." Zoe said she was gesturing wildly while they were arguing, and her hand accidentally brushed Lily's cheek. She would never hurt her intentionally. "You are blowing this completely out of proportion to make Zoe look bad." The gaslighting was so intense, so immediate, that for a fleeting second I almost questioned my own memory. But then the image of the slap, the sound of it, the look on Lily's face came rushing back. "An accident? There's a visible handprint on her face, Mom. Does that sound like an accident to you? We took pictures." My father's expression soured. "This is what you do, Emma. You escalate things, you always have. You've always been jealous of your sister's free spirit because you're so rigid and controlling." It was a classic tactic, one they'd used on me my whole life. Whenever I pointed out Zoe's flaws, it was because I was jealous. Whenever I set a boundary, it was because I was controlling. "This isn't about jealousy," I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "This is about a felony. She stole $15,000, and she hurt my daughter." That was when my mother delivered the line that severed the final thread of our relationship. She looked at me, her eyes cold and hard, and said, "Zoe is just trying to find her way in the world. She needs our support. You have everything, a good job, a husband, a nice house. Why can't you just help her? It's just money. And Lily will be fine. Children are resilient. You're the one tearing this family apart over nothing." Nothing. The safety of my child was nothing. The theft of our hard-earned savings was nothing. My feelings, my boundaries, my entire family unit, it was all nothing compared to the precious, delicate feelings of their golden child. In that moment, I wasn't looking at my parents. I was looking at two strangers who were willing to sacrifice my daughter's well-being on the altar of my sister's ego. Mark stepped forward, his hand on my back. "Margaret, Robert, I think you should leave now." My father scoffed. "We're not going anywhere. This is a family matter." "No," Mark said, his voice deadly serious. "It's not. You've made it very clear who your family is. It's not us." He held the door open, and after a moment of stunned silence, they turned and left, muttering about my disrespect and Mark's influence over me. As the door clicked shut, I knew with chilling certainty that a war had just been declared, and I was no longer fighting for money. I was fighting for my daughter. In the days that followed that horrific confrontation, our home was quiet. It was the heavy, oppressive quiet that comes after a bomb has gone off. Mark and I moved through our routines in a daze, speaking in hushed tones, our conversations always circling back to the same unbelievable reality. Our family, my parents, my sister, had chosen a side, and it wasn't ours. Our primary focus was Lily. The physical mark on her cheek faded within a day, but the emotional wound was far deeper. She became withdrawn, jumping every time the doorbell rang. She stopped asking about her grandparents and her aunt. It was as if a part of her childhood had been violently amputated, and she didn't know how to process the empty space it left behind. We immediately found her a therapist, a kind woman who specialized in childhood trauma. It was a step we never imagined we'd have to take. My parents and Zoe, meanwhile, had launched a campaign of harassment. A barrage of texts and voicemails landed on my phone daily. They ranged from pleading to guilt-tripping to outright aggression. "Emma, you're breaking your mother's heart. Just return Zoe's calls. We can sort this out as a family." One from Zoe was particularly vile. "Hope you're happy. You've probably ruined my whole life over a stupid misunderstanding. Some sister you are." They were trying to create a narrative where I was the aggressor, the cold-hearted villain who was persecuting poor, misunderstood Zoe. They completely ignored the two core issues, the theft and the assault. It was as if those things hadn't even happened. Amidst the emotional turmoil, the practical side of my brain, the financial analyst, kicked in. I needed to understand exactly what had happened. A simple online transfer could be explained away as a misunderstanding, but a physical check was different. I contacted my bank and requested a high-resolution scanned copy of the front and back of the cashed check. When the email arrived and I opened the attachment, I felt a grim sense of validation. The signature was a clear forgery. It was in my name, but the loops were too wide, the slant was wrong. It was the work of someone who had tried to copy my signature but didn't have the muscle memory. This was not a misunderstanding. This was premeditated. Zoe hadn't just impulsively taken the money. She had stolen my check, practiced my signature, and deliberately executed a plan to defraud me. This was hard, undeniable evidence of a crime. I took a screenshot of the forged check and attached it to an email. I sent it to my parents and Zoe with a single line: "This is not a misunderstanding. This is a forged document. This is a felony." I thought, foolishly, that presenting them with irrefutable proof of their daughter's crime would finally make them see reason, that the reality of a forged check would cut through their denial. I was wrong. The response came from my father, the retired accountant, the man who had built his entire career on numbers and rules and integrity. It was a phone call. I put it on speaker so Mark could hear. "Emma, I saw your email," he began, his voice weary and disappointed, as if I were the one causing all the trouble. "You need to stop this now." "Stop what, Dad? Stop pointing out that my sister is a criminal?" I asked, my voice sharp. "You're not thinking clearly," he said, his tone condescending. "Look, she was desperate. You and Mark have plenty of money and you wouldn't help her. You backed her into a corner. Yes, she took the check, and yes, she signed your name, but her intentions weren't malicious. She was just trying to get her business off the ground." I was flabbergasted. Backed her into a corner? Her business is vacation to Bali. We refused to pay for a vacation, so she committed fraud, and you, an accountant, are defending forgery? Then my mother got on the extension. "We'll pay you back, Emma," she said, her voice strained. "We'll take it from our retirement savings. We'll give you the $15,000. Just please drop this. Don't call the police. Don't ruin your sister's life over this. She would never recover from a criminal record." Their words hung in the air, sickening and absolute. They weren't sorry for what Zoe did. They were sorry she got caught. They showed no concern for the fact that I was a victim of a crime or that Lily was the victim of an assault. Their only concern was protecting Zoe from the consequences of her own actions, as they had done her entire life. They were willing to pay me off, to treat the theft like a broken vase that could be replaced, to sweep it all under the rug to maintain their perfect image of their golden child. I looked at Mark. His face was a thundercloud. He just nodded, a single, firm gesture. He knew what I had to do. We both did. There was no family left to save. It was already gone. They had destroyed it, not me. My heart hammered in my chest. This was a line I never thought I would cross, a taboo so deep-seated it felt like a physical betrayal. But when I looked at the picture on my desk of Lily, smiling her bright, innocent smile, I knew I had no other choice. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about showing my daughter that actions have consequences, that nobody is above the law, and that her safety and well-being were more important than any dysfunctional family obligation. With my parents still on the line, pleading and threatening, I hung up. I took a deep breath, picked up the phone again, and with a steady hand, I dialed the non-emergency police number. "I'd like to file a report," I said, my voice clear and unwavering. "For theft, forgery, and assault. The Rubicon had been crossed. There was no going back." Filing the police report felt surreal, like I was describing a scene from a movie, not my own life. I spoke with a calm, detached officer over the phone, laying out the facts: the missing check, the forged signature, the confirmed withdrawal from my bank, and the assault on my daughter. I made sure to mention that the slap had occurred after Zoe was confronted about the theft, linking the two events. The officer was professional and took the details seriously. He told me a detective would be in touch within a few days. When I hung up, a strange sense of calm washed over me. The decision had been made. The chaos was no longer just swirling in my head, it was now in the hands of the legal system. I had taken back a sliver of control. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. The police detective, a no-nonsense woman named Detective Miller, called me the next day. After I forwarded her my evidence, the bank statements, the high-resolution copy of the forged check, the photos of Lily's cheek, and the threatening text messages, she informed me that she would be paying a visit to my sister. The moment that happened, my phone exploded. It was a level of fury I had never experienced. Voicemails from my mother, sobbing hysterically, accusing me of trying to send my own sister to jail. Texts from my father, filled with cold, menacing rage, telling me I had made my bed and would have to lie in it alone. Zoe herself sent a stream of incoherent messages, calling me every name under the sun and threatening to sue me for defamation. It was a coordinated, vicious attack designed to make me feel isolated and guilty, to pressure me into dropping the charges. But something in me had hardened. Their hysterics no longer triggered guilt, they triggered disgust. This wasn't the behavior of a family trying to heal a rift. This was the behavior of co-conspirators trying to cover up a crime. Mark and I sat down that evening and made a decision. For our sanity, and for Lily's peace, we had to cut them off completely. We drafted a single, final text message and sent it to my parents and Zoe from both of our phones. It read, "A police report has been filed. We will no longer be communicating with you directly. All future contact must go through our legal counsel. Do not attempt to contact us or our daughter again." Then, we blocked their numbers. We blocked them on social media. We created an email filter that sent any message from their accounts directly to a folder I wouldn't have to look at. We were building a wall, brick by digital brick. The next day, I called a lawyer recommended by a colleague. He was a calm, experienced family law and civil litigation attorney named Mr. Harrison. I spent an hour in his office, laying out the entire saga. He listened patiently, reviewed my documents, and nodded grimly. "You've done everything right," he told me, his voice reassuring. "Documenting everything, filing the report, and ceasing contact. This is now a criminal matter, and you need to let the process play out. The district attorney's office will likely press charges for the theft and forgery. The assault charge might be more difficult without independent witnesses, but filing the report creates a record." He agreed to act as our intermediary. Any attempt my parents or sister made to contact us would be routed through his office. He would handle the legal side, allowing us to focus on our family. The sense of relief was immense. We weren't alone in this anymore. The weeks that followed were a strange mixture of turmoil and peace. On one hand, the legal process was grinding forward. Detective Miller informed us that Zoe had admitted to taking and cashing the check, but she was sticking to the story that it was a loan and that she had my implied permission. The DA, however, saw the forged signature as clear intent to defraud and was moving forward with charges. On the other hand, our home life had become remarkably serene. Without the constant drama, the guilt-tripping phone calls, and the emotional weight of dealing with Zoe and my parents, a sense of normalcy began to return. Lily started to smile more. She was making progress in therapy, learning to process the betrayal. Mark and I found ourselves reconnecting, our marriage stronger than ever, forged in the fire of this shared crisis. We were a team, a fortress of three. We had drawn a line in the sand, not just for Zoe, but for the toxic family dynamic that had plagued my life for decades. I was finally learning that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family, The one you built is to amputate the one you were born into. It was a painful, grieving process, but with every passing day, I knew, with more certainty than I had ever felt about anything, that it was the right thing to do. The journey to the courtroom was slow and emotionally draining. The district attorney's office formally charged Zoe with 1 count of forgery and 1 count of grand larceny. The assault charge was pursued as a lesser misdemeanor, but the focus was on the financial crimes. The months leading up to the hearing were filled with legal maneuvers from Zoe's public defender. They tried to get the charges dropped, claiming it was a family dispute that didn't belong in a criminal court. They failed. They tried to get me to agree to mediation. On the advice of my lawyer, Mr. Harrison, I refused. This was past the point of mediation. A crime had been committed, and I was determined to see it through. My parents, unable to reach me, funneled their messages through Mr. Harrison, offering to pay back the money immediately if I would just make this all go away. Their offers were always framed around Zoe's future, never with a single word of apology for what she had done to me or to Lily. Finally, the court date arrived. It wasn't a big jury trial like on television. It was a bench hearing in a small, sterile courtroom. Mark took the day off work to be with me. We sat on one side with Mr. Harrison, a united front. On the other side sat Zoe, looking pale and frightened, flanked by my parents. My mother was dressed as if for a funeral, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. My father stared straight ahead, his jaw tight with resentment. When his eyes met mine, there was no flicker of fatherly love, only cold, hard anger. He looked at me as if I were a stranger who had deliberately wronged his family. In his mind, I had. The prosecution laid out the case simply and factually. They presented the bank records, the expert testimony confirming the signature on the check was a forgery, and the text messages where I had explicitly denied Zoe the money just weeks before the theft. It was a clear, straightforward case. Then, it was the defense's turn. Their entire strategy hinged on painting Zoe as a naive, desperate victim and me as a wealthy, vindictive, and jealous older sister. Zoe took the stand, and under the gentle guidance of her lawyer, she began to weep. She talked about her dreams of becoming an artist, her struggles to find her place in the world, and how she had always lived in my shadow. "I thought it was a loan," she sobbed, twisting a tissue in her hands. "Emma had always been so generous. I just assumed she would want to help me. I signed the check myself to save her the trouble. I was going to tell her about it. I was just so excited." It was a pathetic, transparent performance. Next, my mother was called as a character witness. She walked to the stand, casting a sorrowful look at Zoe before turning. The judge, she spoke of Zoe's fragile artistic temperament and her big heart. Then she turned her sights on me. "Emma, she's always been the practical one," my mother said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Everything is black and white to her. Money rules. She doesn't understand the creative spirit. She has so much, and she's always been reluctant to share. I think she's jealous of Zoe's passion." Regarding the slap, she stuck to the accident story. Zoe would never, ever hurt Lily. She was emotional, waving her hands. It was a terrible, unfortunate accident. She was actively, under oath, lying to protect her favored daughter. Listening to my mother assassinate my character in a court of law was a unique and profound kind of pain. Finally, I was called to testify. As I walked to the stand, I avoided looking at my family. I focused on the prosecutor, then the judge. I spoke calmly and factually. I didn't embellish or get emotional. I simply recounted the events as they happened: the repeated requests for money, my refusal, the discovery of the theft, the forged check, the confrontation, and the assault on my daughter. Zoe's lawyer tried to trip me up on cross-examination. "Isn't it true, Ms. Miller, that you have a history of conflict with your sister? Isn't it true that you resent your parents for the financial support they've given her? Isn't it possible that in your anger, you misinterpreted the situation with your daughter?" To every question, I gave a calm, firm answer. I have a history of my sister asking me for money and me refusing. I don't resent my parents for helping her. I resent my sister for stealing from me. No, it is not possible to misinterpret someone slapping your child across the face. When the testimony was over, the judge, a stern-looking man in his late 60s, leaned forward, his eyes fixed on Zoe. He had been silent and observant throughout the proceedings. he asked her two simple questions. "Ms. Williams," he said, his voice cutting through the quiet room, "if you believed this was a loan you had permission for, why did you feel the need to forge your sister's signature?" Zoe stammered. I just thought it would be faster." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Faster than sending a text message asking her to sign it? A text message you were clearly capable of sending." His second question was even more pointed. "And why, after your sister discovered the loan, did your parents immediately offer to pay her back to avoid police involvement?" Zoe had no answer. Her carefully constructed narrative had crumbled under the weight of basic logic. The judge had seen right through it all. He had seen through the tears, the lies, and the desperate performance. He saw the truth. The judge took only a short recess to consider his verdict. When he returned, the tension in the courtroom was thick enough to choke on. He looked over his notes, then directly at Zoe. "In the matter of the state versus Zoe Williams," he began, his voice leaving no room for doubt, "on the charge of forgery, I find the defendant guilty. On the charge of grand larceny, I find the defendant guilty." My mother let out a small, strangled gasp. My father simply stared ahead, his face impassive, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. I felt a wave of something, not joy, not victory, but a profound, weary sense of closure. The truth had been officially recognized. The judge continued, his gaze unwavering. "This is not, as the defense has argued, a simple family dispute. This was a calculated act of theft and betrayal, compounded by a blatant attempt to manipulate the legal system with a fabricated story." He then addressed my parents directly. "And let me be clear," he said, his voice laced with disapproval, "your attempts to excuse and cover for your daughter's criminal behavior are, frankly, appalling. You have not helped her. You have enabled her to this point, where she now stands as a convicted felon." My parents flinched as if struck. The judge then turned back to a now openly weeping Zoe. He took the assault on Lily into consideration during sentencing, calling it an aggravating factor that demonstrated a complete lack of moral character. He sentenced Zoe to 5 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and ordered her to pay full restitution of the $15,000, with payments to be garnished from any future wages and managed by the court. Crucially, he also issued a 5-year restraining order, prohibiting Zoe from having any contact with me, Mark, or our daughter, Lily. As the judge concluded, the reality of the verdict settled over my family. My parents rushed to Zoe's side, shielding her as if she were the victim. As they walked past me to leave the courtroom, my mother paused. She looked at me, her eyes filled not with remorse or sadness, but with pure, unadulterated hatred. "I hope you're happy," she whispered, her voice venomous. "You've destroyed this family." I met he. Our gaze, and for the first time in my life, I felt nothing but pity for her. "No, Mom," I said softly, but with absolute conviction. "You and Dad did that a long time ago. I just stopped pretending it wasn't broken." She recoiled, and then they were gone, sweeping Zoe out of the courtroom and out of my life. Mark put his arm around me, and we walked out into the sunlight. There was no sense of triumph, no desire to celebrate. There was just a quiet, hollow ache for the family I once had, and a burgeoning sense of peace for the family I still did. The following months were transformative. The court-ordered restitution payments began arriving in our account every month like clockwork, a cold, impersonal reminder of the chasm that now separated us. We heard nothing from my parents or sister, and the silence was a balm. Without their constant presence, our home became a sanctuary of calm and stability. Lily continued with her therapy and slowly began to blossom. The fear in her eyes was replaced by the carefree confidence of a teenager who knows she is safe and loved. Her trust had been broken by her own family, but it was being rebuilt, stronger than ever, by the unwavering support of her parents. Mark and I used the returned money to open a new, secure college fund in Lily's name, one that no one else could ever touch. It was a symbolic act, closing a painful chapter and starting a new one focused entirely on our future. I sometimes grieve for the mother, father, and sister I wish I had. I see other families celebrating holidays together, and I feel a pang of loss. But then I look at my husband and my daughter, laughing together in our peaceful living room, and I know I made the right choice. I didn't destroy my family, I saved mine. I learned the hardest lesson of my life in that courtroom. Sometimes, the only way to heal is to cut out the disease, even if it means losing a part of yourself. The $15,000 was just money. The price of our peace, of Lily's safety, of our future, that was priceless. And it was a price I would pay again, without a moment's hesitation.